Today we are talking about one of the greatest games of all time, Fischer-Taimanov, Game 4 from their match in 1971. I've been thinking about this game for decades. Loads of people think about this as one of the greatest games of all time. They think of it as emblematic of what would later be called the Fischer ending. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. I have to do this as part of my dojo training program. I have to memorize the game, so I'm going to try to do this by memory. It's a very difficult game to memorize, and that's why we put it for a upper cohort, because there's a lot of nuance to it, and it's kind of long. Now, I want to say I've done just human analysis on this. Also, Shereshevsky, in his endgame strategy book, talks a little bit about the endgame, so I have that in the back of my mind. But most importantly, I just finished reading this. Actually, I'm still reading it, but this amazing book, I Was a Victim of Bobby Fischer by Taimanov himself. Very human notes. Beautiful book. I'm going to review that book later. Okay, so as I said, I have to memorize this thing, and we're going to see if I can do it. I don't give myself a 100% chance, by the way. I think this is going to be very difficult. All right, here we go. Boom. All right. So, Fischer starts e4. Okay. c5, knight f3, knight c6. Where Taimanov is playing the Taimanov. Okay. d4 takes. Now, in the first time they had this in the match, Taimanov played e6. In general, that's going to transpose. But there's a really interesting feature about queen c7. The drawback of queen c7 is it encourages white to play maybe a move like c4. And the issue with c4 is maybe black could try to win a pawn with queen e5. Well, black can transpose too with a move like e6. But one of the interesting things that Taimanov says is he says he wanted to do this because he knew Fischer didn't like that kind of unclarity. He liked clarity. Very interesting insight, and he's right. Fischer goes knight c3. So in the first match, e6, we had a bind, and now we're going to get this knight c3. Okay, so here we go. e6, and now white can do any number of things, but white plays g3 here. Now, it does break the opening principle of moving an unnecessary pawn. However, it's important to see that with this move, white is introducing the threat of bishop f4. Okay, so for example, if knight f6, bishop f4, it's a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, so that's why black plays a6. Bishop g2, knight f6. Now I have to really start concentrating completely. Castles. And now, by the way, I think Taimanov plays this game beautifully. I think so many of his moves make sense to me. And this variation is something we still see today. Fischer plays bishop f4. Now, one of the cool points of this is that first we're gaining a tempo, part of the whole idea with playing g3, but that after, let me put in the move played, that this endgame, which to beginners might look poor for white because this is shattered the pawn structure, it's actually terrible for black because this bishop is so amazing. That bishop will soon stand, just taking over the dark squares, just taking them over. Okay, so in this we have d6, and now it was so great to read Taimanov's notes because he's really drilled down into so many of these positions. This is definitely still part of his prep, Taimanov's prep. And he says queen d2 exclam, or, exclam, because queen d3 will allow some counterplay with knight d7 and later either knight e5 or knight c5, depending on how it goes. Queen d2 is also a little unnatural because it seems like you're allowing bishop b4. The problem with any bishop b4, though, is knight b5 exclam. Okay, so here we go. Queen d2, now a nice move from Taimanov, h6. Looks very weird, but the point is we are going to have to play e5, and we cannot allow bishop g5. If we allow bishop g5, we will be giving away the d5 square for the knight. Quick timeout here. Did you know that the dojo is an incredible site with tactics, a database, a community of people trying to improve, a training program? All of this is going on at our site. So go check it out. ChessDojo.club. Hit the link in the description. Okay, so here we go. Rook AD1, E5, Bishop E3. Now the first point to understand is that if black takes, we're going to play pawn takes. All right? And so that's why bishop g4 first. Okay. Now, maybe I'll just show a fun variation here. Bishop takes, pawn takes. The pawn is threatened. King e7. Rook takes f6. And we got this bad boy coming. Okay. Bishop g4. And now for Taimanov, he and his crew had looked at this position and they felt black was fine. And they were thinking, for example, here, here, and they said, no problemo, no problemo. Okay, so in fact, though, what Bobby does is plays this very nice bishop c5. Okay, the first point to see with bishop c5 is if bishop d1, let's go ahead, let's do the game move, and then we'll do bishop d1. Bishop d6, queen moves somewhere, rook d1, and the point is that the king will never get out. And even if you pin my bishop, you're not going to have the strength because your rook is completely out of play. So excellent, bishop takes c5. D takes c5. If you take with the queen, we'll play queen d6. Okay, so now f3, it still looks like black is fine. Bishop e6, and now f4. Excellent. So the point of this move is that if black plays the natural castles, white will then have queen d6, and that will be a terrible ending for black. One thing we can say about that is it's a good example of the king undeveloping himself. He would really like to be in the center. Okay, so Taimanov plays a great move. Rook d8, knight d5. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and again, a great move from Taimanov, e4. So when we think about it from black's perspective, honestly, it seems like we're doing fine. If white, for example, plays c4, we'll castle, we'll protect the pawn, no problem. Okay, Fischer finds an idea, rook fe1, exclam. There's only one move, rook takes d5, rook takes e4. Oh, what a game. So now if knight e4, queen d5, we're crushing. So black plays king d8. I spent some time looking at king d7. It's a little weird, though, and I'm just going to leave that there. If you want to look at king d7, you can. All right, king d8. By the way, if king f8, then we have rook e8, and we have a great middle game because the king is not castled. So king d8, queen e2. Snip, snap, queen d7. Now, I think one of the cool things to think about for this match and just chess history in general is I don't think at this point Taimanov felt, maybe he might have felt he was worse, but I really don't think he felt he was in big of trouble as he kind of is. Okay? And the point is when we talk about the Fischer ending, let's go ahead and trade these queens here. When we talk about the Fischer ending, the important thing to think about is that the problem with the bishop is it only covers one color, okay? The advantage of the bishop is it can cover more squares than the knight, and we're going to do some examples of that. For example, here the knight is doing 8 squares. Our bishop will be able to do more. If the reason that we call it the Fischer endgame, that's rook and bishop versus rook and knight, is because he showed that the power of the rook is to cover the dark squares that the bishop cannot control. So we control more squares, plus our rook is able to cover the dark squares, which we cannot control. Okay, so here we go. Rook e5. Now, this position, I mean, this game has been analyzed very deeply by a variety of people. And in Cheryshev, I remember, they talked about king d6 as being the key move here. And in order to play this move, you already have to have a deep sense of how black might be in trouble. One of the things to see strategically, though, is we would rather have our pawns on light squares. But I say strategically because we have to talk about bishop b7, of course, right? We would rather put our pawns on the light squares. We're going to see in the game, Fischer forces them on the dark squares, and I'll talk about why that's a big deal in a second. Okay. If we were able to play b5, maybe we could survive. Now, oh, by the way, this is another important, very interesting point about king d6. Let me just show, actually. So the point is here, 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 and we have more than enough counterplay. Okay, so let's go back. One of the key things to see about why there's another reason king d6 is not intuitive, I think, for black. I am certain, this is why, I am certain that Taimanov sees that if the knight can come to d6, he will hold everything together. So putting the king on d6 is already not something he's thinking about. A lot of people, I think, when they see king d6, they're like, oh, I would have seen that. I would have appreciated that. Interestingly, in the book, Taimanov doesn't even mention it. I don't think it's ever even come to his attention that he had this ability to play king d6. Okay, so imagine you're Taimanov, you play b6, and the idea here is going to be that I can get in knight e8 to d6. Now, something I want to stress, just because you have the Fischer ending doesn't mean, you're going to win the game. The knight is a great blockading piece, and for Taimanov's generation, for example, also my sensei, Smyslov, they saw the knight as being equal in value to the bishop. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some situations where the bishop is better. It just means that in general, the knight is okay. He's fine. This is a fine piece. And in a position like this as well, from the precepts of that time, we would say, oh, it's totally fine because the bishop is really going to thrive in positions with passed pawns moving on both sides with an especially open board. Neither of those is the case here, at least ostensibly. Now, one of the things about the Fischer endgame, which makes it so difficult, is chess in general has the tendency, a chess game has the tendency to open up. So even if you start from a closed position, the player playing with the bishop can think to themselves, oh, I can open this bad boy up. And Fischer showed again and again how that could be done from a strategic point of view. All right, so b6, from my sensibilities, this is the only mistake that Taimanov really makes in this game. We're going to question another one, but we're going to see, I think it's already pretty poor. All right, so bishop f1, exclam. a5, I worked on this position. I don't see anything better. Bishop c4, rook f8. All right, so it's time to talk a little bit about the basics here. First thing we want to address is the number of squares. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 at the moment for the bishop. So that's 2 more than Mr. Knight, right? And the knight's never getting better than 8. So it's that difference that is going to determine the value of the bishop over the knight. And as expressed, the rook is compensating for the bishop's deficiencies. Okay, so let me get rid of all these. One of the amazing things about forcing the pawns onto dark squares is that we get what with Nimzowitsch is this great thing that I applied to a situation like this, where Nimzowitsch talks about a rook on the 7th rank and achieving the absolute 7th. And that just means all the pawns are basically out of the way. And so you would think, oh, the rook wants to attack those pawns. Yeah, he likes to attack pawns on the 7th. But if you move the pawns out of the way, the bishop gains even more scope. Okay. So this was also important. So you see here, got all this scope, all these beautiful squares. And it's important to see that this pawn, you could say, oh, I want to move that pawn. Well, when you move the pawn, you give access to e6, and you also give the g8 square, making it 11 squares. Okay. All right, let's see if I can do it. Now comes the hard part. King g2. Now at this point, I was really trying to work hard to get the knight to e8. In the game, king d6 is played, but I'll just share. It's close to working, but it's not. Bishop b5, I think, is an exclam. This forces king d8. Then check, and look, I'm coming downtown. And I thought, like, maybe I could survive this, but it's really bad news. Once the knight moves, I get rook a7. No good. No good. So king d6, king f3, knight d7, rook e3. Now, one of the great things about memorizing a game is you're really forced to drill down into the logic of the game and also how the players are thinking. So rook e3 here is all about making black concerned that maybe I have rook b3 at some point. So for example, knight b8, rook d3 check, and now the king has to make a decision. Which way do you go? The drawbacks of e7 are that this guy's weak, number one, but two, it also means that our king will start dreaming about coming in. So two problems. Okay. Also on king e7, bishop b5 might just dominate and win. Okay. So king c7, and this is a first indication. You can see the king is stretched between the potential weaknesses on the queen side and the king side. King side is obvious. The queen side is important to see. It's really all about the potential of our king coming in here. Okay, so king c7, c3, exclam. Now, the point of c3 is to stop the knight from coming to d4. In general, I want you to see as well, though, that Fischer is putting his pawns on dark squares. And the effect of that is, like the rook, those pawns help us compensate for our deficiency on the dark squares. The knight can do two squares. We can only do one color with our bishop. So the bishops are helping us and thereby controlling the dark square entry points that the knight would love to use. By the way, with this knight maneuver that Taimanov's doing, he's not getting to d6. If you just imagine the knight on d6, what a champ he would be. Covering f7, e4 entrance, c4 entrance, b5 entrance. Oh man, we would be fine. And that would be an example of how the knight and rook could defend just fine in a blockading style position, like the ancients told us to do. But it's just this little bit of initiative that Fischer has, which is preventing the knight from getting to d6. Okay, so here we go. Knight c6, rook e3. Stretching the king. King d6, and now a nice move, a4. Now, you could say, Kraai, you just told me not to put the pawns there, but I think it's fair to say there's an exception for the rook pawns, because the rook pawns control less, and here the effect is just to tell black, I don't even want to worry about you playing a4. You probably can't play a4 anyway, but I don't want to worry about it, and I want to fix the structure, and now I have a simple dream, amongst others, of bringing L king to b5. Okay. By the way, at this point, I don't have the times. No one does, to my knowledge. Like, there's no time graph. But we're coming up. They're going to adjourn the game fairly soon. So I think the next couple moves might have been a little bit nervy. Okay, here we go. Knight e7, h3. This one's actually kind of hard to remember. I think h4 would have been fine. But I think Fischer's intuition is to say, I don't want to put the pawn here and then worry about some kind of h5, knight f5 thing. So I'm just going to first just put the pawn on h3. I'm not worried about knight f5 really anyway because of rook e5. Taimanov goes back. Now, there's going to be various points in this game you could say to yourself, Taimanov, he should have done something more active, but he has a sense of how to hold this position. All right, now h4. Okay, now put yourself in Taimanov's shoes for a second. You're just sitting there. It's very difficult. Once you move this f pawn, you give access to e6. How do you not move the f pawn, right? Now, you're going to see like, he's going to play h5 and then like g4, g5. And two things will happen with that kind of setup. One, white will be able to open the position, which he wants to do because of the bishops. Two, the white pawns will get what Korchnoi calls kinetic energy. That just means they're closer to the other side of the board, giving me tactical opportunities to do stuff. So this is a move which a lot of people have criticized, and it's probably right to criticize, but to me, it's not, the problems don't stop if you don't play h5, right? They don't stop if you don't play h5. Now, the problem with h5, is, as we'll see, let's just show, rook d5 check, king c7, rook d5, and we are going to force that f pawn to move. Now, f5 is played. If g6, it doesn't really help. We'll just still move the rook back. At some point, we're going to play f5, king f4. So Taimanov has an idea here, and he's going to try to construct a blockade. All right, the damage has been done. Rook d2. Actually, I forgot to mention Taimanov has this great sense when he says a4 exclam. He's like, he says something about the golden road for the king now, and that's going to be a key feature. All right, here we go. Rook f6. Now, rook e2. We're again stretching the king, threatening rook e8. Black says, okay, king here. Rook here. Whew. Okay. g6, bishop b5, and I believe it was here that the game was adjourned. This is a very instructive position. I think a lot of chump GMs here would play rook d3 with the simple sense that that is a winning ending for white because, well, we're going to talk about it in the game because that's kind of what we're going to get. But the issue with rook d3 is we lose our initiative for half a second. And now, no matter what, excuse me, bad move. Now, no matter what goes on here, we are going to achieve, one way or another, the knight getting to d6. We're going to save our souls. Okay. Whew, amazing. So let's go back, and we have not all of this, but rather king e2, and black is essentially in zugzwang here. Very difficult to move. Plays king d8. Now rook d3. All right, king c7. Now we get our rook trade. Again, this is all about not letting that stupid knight get the d6. The king obviously now has dreams of coming in. Okay, so the first thing to recognize, black plays knight e7, is that the pawn endgame here, as far as I can tell, is lost. Let's say here, 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 and he's gonna get pushed away. Toast. Okay, so knight e7. All right. It's not over yet, my friends. Bishop e8. You can do it, Jesse. You can do it. All right. So now, king d5, bishop f7. And now, I've gone over this game so many times, but I didn't appreciate that black's next move has a lot of cunning to it. You could have gone c6 as well, but what this is going to do is he wants White's bishop to be on e8. We're going to see how that works out. So, king c4, king c6, bishop e8 check, king v7, king b5, and here's Taimanov's idea, knight c8, threatening mate, threatening mate. Okay, so this is his idea, and part of the whole point here is that white cannot achieve in this position king a6 because the bishop is hanging. So if you imagine, like if the bishop were on f7, then we'd get that king a6 immediately. Whew. Okay, so here we go. Bishop d5. Okay, now it's important to see that knight d6. Actually, I'll do his move first, and then we'll look at the variation. Knight d6, king a6 is zugzwang already, and the important variation is knight e4, snook, snark, snack, here, 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 and pop. And we were talking about how the bishop is better with passed pawns, and you can see it here, my friends. The bishop is dominating the knight. This guy's running. Crispy critters. Okay, so Taimanov, dude, he's not falling for any of that. Knight e7. Now, important momentito. Most chumps here would play bishop f7, but then after king b7, we'd find ourselves in the same situation. So, bishop c4. Whew. All right. This king b7. Again, he is trying to prevent king a6. Bishop f7. King a7. So imagine you're Taimanov. You're saying to yourself, it's pretty loose, but maybe I'm going to hold this bad boy. Bishop b3. Excellent. Now, if the knight moves at all, our king is coming in. It's too much. So, here we go. King b7. Bishop d1. Delicious. King c7, and the point is, if you go king a7, bishop f3, it's an immediate zugzwang. It's just immediate zugzwang. You move the knight, I'm coming in. So king c7. Whew. Here we go. Bishop f3. And now some sources give knight c8, some give knight g8. The book I'm reading gave knight g8, so I'm going to give that one. All right, so here we go. Don't blow it, Kraai. You're close. You're close, buddy. You're close. Okay, you got it, bud. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it, buddy. Okay. So, bishop d5, knight e7, bishop c4, exclam. We're going to see what the point is. Fischer already sees the end of the game. King b7, bishop f. Oh, you did blow it. You did blow it, Kraai. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. I knew this was going to be a hard part for me. Whew. All right. King c7. Notice, no knight c6. Bishop f3. Knight g8. Bishop d5. Now, the point is when I come out with this knight e7, my bishop is under attack, so I'm still not able to play bishop king a6, because that's what I want, right? Uh-oh, Kraai. Uh-oh, did you blow it, buddy? Okay, this is the moment of truth. The moment of truth. All right, knight g8. Yeah, I think we just play king a6 here. Okay, I think we got it. King A6, knight E7, bishop G2, good. Knight G8, here. Ooh, a little hot, Jesse, a little hot. Knight E7, right, got it. Okay, took me a second, let's promote that. Bishop C4, key move. We are gonna see Fischer sees the end. King C6, bishop F7, King C7. And now bishop E8 with a beautiful final trap. It seems like black is going to live on King D8, his only move at Zugzwang. But Fischer's got whack, whack, and now it's all over. Knight C8, A5, knight D6, B5, knight E4, King B6. Obviously, we're running. King C8, King C6, King B8, B6, and here Taimanov resigned. Sample variation. And we queen. Okay, my friends. Whew, that was really hard. Great exercise to do at the dojo. This is the first time I've actually done it officially as one of the tasks. And, you know, the other, depending on what level you are, they're harder. Obviously, this is one of the harder cohorts levels to do this. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to talk a little bit about this book in a review upcoming. And the forcing yourself to analyze a game will, or to memorize a game, excuse me, will force you to really drill down into the inner logic of the game, and you'll get so much more out of it because you have to understand that logic, the story of it, to know, to be able to do the moves. All right, till next time.